On a cold morning in March, Rome's most powerful man walked into a building he would never leave alive. Julius Caesar did not fall to an enemy army. He did not die on a battlefield. He was surrounded by men he trusted. Friends, allies, senators who smiled as they stepped closer. Then the knives came out. 23 times they stabbed him. They believed they were saving Rome. They called themselves Liberators. They told themselves they were heroes. In their minds, this was the moment the Republic was reborn, freed from one man's growing power. But history does not care about good intentions. And Rome would answer them with blood. Because what followed Caesar's death was not freedom. It was chaos, fear, civil war, and a slow, merciless hunt that would end nearly every man who raised a blade that day. Within just a few years, the assassins would be dead. Some would fall in battle. Some would be captured and executed far from home. Others, broken by guilt and failure, would turn their swords on themselves. Their names would be cursed. Their bodies denied burial. The republic they claimed to defend would collapse completely, replaced by something far worse than the tyranny they feared. This is not a story about Caesar. This is the story of the men who killed him, and how none of them escaped the consequences. Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. The morning of March 15, 44 BC, began like many others in Rome. The streets were busy. Merchants opened their stalls. Senators prepared for meetings. Julius Caesar, dictator of Rome, was expected at the Senate. It was supposed to be an ordinary political day. But underneath the calm surface, fear and betrayal were already moving. For months, many senators had been afraid of Caesar's power. He had won wars. He had crushed his enemies. He had been named dictator for life. Some believed Rome was slowly becoming a kingdom again, with Caesar as king. To proud Roman nobles, this was unbearable. Rome had expelled kings centuries earlier. The Republic was supposed to be ruled by laws, not by one man. So they planned his death. More than 60 senators joined the conspiracy. Some hated Caesar. Some feared him. Others were jealous of his success. A few convinced themselves they were acting for the good of Rome. They met in secret. They swore oaths. They chose their weapons carefully, short daggers, easy to hide beneath their robes. They chose the Senate meeting at the theater of Pompey as the place. It was symbolic. Pompey had once been Caesar's great rival, defeated and killed during the Civil War. Now Caesar would die in Pompey's shadow. Caesar received warnings. A soothsayer told him to beware the Ides of March. His wife Calpurnia begged him not to go, shaken by terrible dreams of his death. For a moment, Caesar hesitated. Then one of the conspirators, a man he trusted deeply, persuaded him to attend. Caesar did not want to appear weak. He rose, dressed, and walked toward his fate. Inside the Senate, the conspirators gathered around him, pretending to present a petition. Caesar listened impatiently. Then someone grabbed his toga. Another struck him from behind. The first wound was shallow. Caesar turned in shock, shouting in anger and pain. But then he saw the circle closing in. Daggers flashed. Faces he knew stared back at him. He was stabbed again. And again. And again. When Caesar saw Brutus among them, the man he loved and trusted, his resistance stopped. Ancient writers say he pulled his robe over his face and fell at the base of Pompey's statue. By the time it was over, Caesar had been stabbed 23 times. He lay dead on the Senate floor, blood soaking the stones. The assassins stood in silence, breathing hard. They believed the hardest part was over. They believed Rome would cheer them. They raised their bloody daggers and shouted that the tyrant was dead and the Republic was free. They were wrong. Outside, the city did not celebrate. The people were confused. Then they were angry. Then they were afraid. Shops closed. Crowds gathered. Whispers turned into shouts. Rome had not been saved. Rome had been wounded. That day, the conspirators crossed a line they could never return from. And the price they would pay had already begun to grow. After Julius Caesar's body lay cold on the Senate floor, the men who killed him expected applause. They believed the city would rise in joy. They believed the people would thank them for removing a tyrant. Instead, Rome went silent. Then Rome turned against them. The senators who had stabbed Caesar did not control the army. They did not control the streets. They had misjudged the one force that mattered most, the Roman people. Caesar had been generous to them. He had cancelled debts. He had given land to veterans. He had promised stability after years of civil war. To the common citizens, Caesar was not a tyrant. He was a protector. As night fell on the Ides of March, fear spread through the conspirators. They locked themselves inside buildings, clutching their daggers, listening to the noise outside. They waited for cheers that never came. Instead, rumors filled the city. Caesar's loyal supporters were gathering. Soldiers were angry. The mob was restless. The next days destroyed what little hope they had left. Mark Antony, Caesar's closest ally, acted quickly. He pretended to make peace with the assassins, buying time. Then he spoke at Caesar's funeral. He did not attack them directly. He spoke calmly. He showed Caesar's blood-stained robe. He read Caesar's will aloud. Every Roman citizen, the will said, would receive money. Caesar had left his gardens to the public. He had thought of the people even in death. The crowd exploded. Cries of grief turned into rage. Fires were lit in the streets. The mob hunted for the men responsible. Houses were attacked. Anyone suspected of supporting the assassins was threatened. Rome was no longer safe for them. One by one, the conspirators fled the city they claimed to love. Brutus and Cassius, the leaders, escaped east. Others ran to distant provinces, hoping old titles would protect them. Some hid under false names. Some abandoned their families, knowing association with them meant death. They told themselves this chaos was temporary. They believed once things calmed down, reason would return. They were still senators. They still believed in the Republic. But power had already shifted. Rome did not move backward. It moved forward into war. Mark Antony and a young man named Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, would soon form an alliance. Together, they would hunt down Caesar's killers with cold determination. Lists were made. Names were written. Anyone connected to the conspiracy was marked for death. The assassins had become outlaws. Across the Mediterranean world, Roman armies marched. Battles were planned. The republic the conspirators thought they were saving was slipping away. And the men who had raised their daggers now lived with a single truth: there would be no forgiveness. Only survival. But survival, for most of them, would not last long. Among all the men who stabbed Julius Caesar, none carried a heavier burden than Marcus Junius Brutus. His name alone held power in Rome. His ancestors had once helped overthrow kings. He believed it was his duty to protect the Republic, even if it meant killing a man who trusted him completely. Caesar had treated Brutus like a son. He had forgiven him after past wars. He had given him honors and power. Some even whispered that Caesar might have been his real father. Brutus knew this love. And still, he raised his blade. After the assassination, Brutus tried to speak to the people of Rome. He stood in the streets and explained that Caesar had died for freedom. He spoke calmly. He spoke honestly. But the crowd did not listen. They shouted him down. They did not see a hero. They saw a murderer. When Brutus fled Rome, he carried more than fear. He carried doubt. In the east, he gathered an army. Senators, soldiers, and exiles joined him. They told him he was doing the right thing. They reminded him of old Roman values. But the weight of Caesar's death followed him everywhere. Across the sea, Mark Antony and Octavian prepared for war. In 42 BC, the armies met at Philippi, in northern Greece. Brutus and Cassius held strong positions on high ground. They had supplies. They had numbers. For a moment, it seemed the assassins might win. But war does not follow plans. During the first battle, confusion spread. Dust filled the air. Messages failed to arrive. Cassius, seeing chaos in his camp, believed everything was lost. He took his own life, thinking Brutus had already fallen. When Brutus learned the truth, he wept. He had lost his closest ally to a terrible mistake. Now Brutus stood alone. Weeks later, his soldiers grew restless. Supplies ran low. They demanded a final battle. Brutus knew it was risky, but he gave in. When the fighting began, his army collapsed. Men ran. Lines broke. Hope vanished. As night fell, Brutus fled into the hills with a few loyal friends. There was no escape left. Ships waited far away, but he refused to run again. That night, he spoke quietly under the stars. He talked about honor, about betrayal, about how virtue had failed him. He thanked his friends for their loyalty. Then he made his choice. Brutus asked one man to hold his sword steady. He fell upon it without hesitation. By morning, his body was found. Mark Antony ordered him buried with honor, calling him the noblest Roman of all. But nobility could not save him. Brutus had killed a dictator and destroyed himself with the same act. If Brutus was driven by honor, then Gaius Cassius Longinus was driven by calculation. Cassius was not a dreamer. He was a realist. He understood power, armies, and fear. He was the true architect of the conspiracy against Julius Caesar. While Brutus gave the plot its moral face, Cassius gave it structure. Cassius hated Caesar's rise. He believed one man holding such power would always destroy the Republic. He recruited the assassins. He chose the time and place. He believed that once Caesar was dead, Rome would return to old traditions. But Cassius made one fatal mistake. He never understood the people. To Cassius, Caesar was a tyrant. To the masses, Caesar was a hero. When the city turned against the assassins, Cassius realized too late how badly he had misread Rome. His sharp mind had failed where it mattered most. After fleeing Italy, Cassius used his military skill to stay alive. He gathered legions in the east. He controlled money, ships, and soldiers. On paper, his position was strong. But inside, he was uneasy. Ancient writers say he was troubled by signs and omens. Birds circled his camp. Accidents happened before battle. Cassius joked darkly that the gods had abandoned him. At Philippi, Cassius commanded the southern forces. When Mark Antony attacked suddenly, everything unraveled. Antony's veterans broke through the defenses with brutal force. Cassius watched the battlefield from a hill, unable to see clearly through the dust and smoke. Messengers failed to return. Soldiers ran in panic. Cassius believed his army was destroyed. He sent a trusted scout to learn what had happened. While waiting, he climbed higher, straining his eyes. Then he saw the scout surrounded by horsemen. From a distance, Cassius believed his friend had been captured by the enemy. It was not true. Those horsemen were allies, celebrating victory on another part of the field. But Cassius did not know this. In his mind, everything was lost. Brutus must be dead. The Republic was finished. Cassius made his choice quickly. He ordered his freedman to kill him with the same dagger that had struck Caesar. The blade that helped end a dictator now ended the life of one of his killers. Moments later, the scout returned alive, calling out in victory. Cassius was already dead. When Brutus arrived and learned the truth, he was crushed. Cassius had died not because he lost the battle, but because he lost faith. His sharp mind, his planning, his hatred of tyranny, all of it ended because of one terrible misunderstanding. Cassius had feared losing everything. In truth, he had been winning. Brutus and Cassius were the faces of the conspiracy, but they were not alone. Dozens of other senators had raised their blades against Julius Caesar. Each one believed he would escape punishment. Each one was wrong. After the defeat at Philippi, the world became very small for Caesar's remaining killers. There was nowhere safe to go. Rome was no longer a republic of laws. It was a place ruled by lists, orders, and revenge. One of the most hated traitors was Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus. Caesar had trusted him deeply. Decimus had fought beside him in war. Caesar had named him in his will. On the morning of the assassination, it was Decimus who convinced Caesar to ignore his wife's fears and go to the Senate. Without him, Caesar might have lived. After the murder, Decimus fled north. He still commanded legions and believed his rank would protect him. For a time, he resisted Mark Antony's forces. But loyalty is fragile when fear rules. His soldiers began to desert him. They did not want to die for a lost cause. Disguised as a common man, Decimus tried to escape across the mountains. He was captured by local tribes loyal to Antony. There was no trial. No mercy. He was executed quietly in a foreign land. His body was never returned to his family. His name was erased. Others met even darker ends. Some were captured and tortured for information. Some were dragged through streets by soldiers. Some vanished into history without a single recorded word. A few chose suicide, preferring their own blade to public execution. One conspirator was murdered by his own slaves. Another died sick and exhausted while fleeing across the sea. Another lived in hiding for years before finally being found and killed. Not one of them died peacefully. Mark Antony, Octavian, and their allies hunted them methodically. This was not justice. It was a message. Anyone who challenged power would be destroyed completely. And while the assassins were dying, something else was happening. The Republic was ending. Emergency powers became permanent. Armies followed men, not laws. Octavian slowly removed his rivals. When the dust settled, Rome no longer pretended to be free. It had an emperor. The men who killed Caesar believed they were preventing tyranny. Instead, they created it. Their daggers did not save Rome. They cleared the path for empire. When the final conspirators were dead, there were no celebrations. No monuments were raised to honor them. No public funerals marked their passing. Their story ended not with glory, but with silence. History remembered only a few names: Brutus, Cassius, Decimus. The rest faded into shadows, their lives reduced to brief lines in old books. Men who once sat in the Senate, who believed they guided the fate of Rome, became warnings instead of heroes. The republic they claimed to love did not survive them. After years of civil war, Rome was exhausted. The people wanted peace more than freedom. They wanted food, safety, and order. Octavian understood this better than anyone. He did not call himself a king. He did not wear a crown. He spoke softly about restoring the republic while quietly taking all real power into his hands. By the time anyone realized what had happened, it was too late. Rome had an emperor. The assassins of Julius Caesar feared tyranny, yet their actions destroyed the last barriers against it. The Senate lost its strength. Laws bent to military power. Armies answered to individuals, not the state. The old republic died slowly, not on the Ides of March, but in the years that followed, as Rome traded liberty for stability. There is a cruel lesson buried in their fate. Good intentions are not enough. Honor does not protect against consequences. Killing one man cannot save a broken system. The conspirators believed removing Caesar would fix Rome. They never asked whether Rome itself was already beyond saving. Even Mark Antony, who honored Brutus in death, understood the truth. He called him the noblest Roman, not because he succeeded, but because he failed honestly. Brutus acted from belief, not ambition. And belief led him to ruin. The rest of the conspirators did not even receive that mercy. They died hunted, forgotten, or broken. Their bodies left unburied. Their families ruined. Their cause erased. In the end, Julius Caesar's enemies did not defeat him. They proved him right. Because after they were gone, Rome did not return to freedom. It accepted empire. And the men who tried to stop that future became the reason it arrived. This was the final irony of the Republic. The daggers meant to save Rome only helped bury it.